Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're well. So today I've got a beautiful project, well, two projects for you from one fat quarter. I actually made the first project already and showed it to you in a previous video, but let me show it to you now what it looks like in case you've forgotten what it looks like. So this was one of the projects that I actually made from that fat quarter. And let me show you the quilt now. It is absolutely gorgeous, guys. You're going to love it. So this is what it looks like. Let me try and find the major design on the quilt. And I'm still not finding it. Let's see if I can find it on this side again. There it is. Hopefully you saw what I was trying to show to you, but you will see it at the end anyway. I used one fat quarter, as I said, to make this, and this was a really quick, simple, beginner-friendly quilt. Okay, it is a quilt as you go for this particular one, and as I said, it comes about very quickly. It is set quite differently, not in the middle of the quilt as you would think, and it's just very simple quilting on it. So if you want to see how I got this together, these two projects, look at that. It is amazing. It is amazing, guys. One fat quarter, you know. One fat quarter, two projects. Sometimes I surprise myself. Okay? All right, so let's go have a look at how I actually made this. Watch till the end and I show you exactly how the whole quilt comes about. And I will put the video for making this one at the end. Oh, in fact, no, I'm going to link it right up there so you have it immediately. And I will also link it at the end as well, so you don't miss it. Okay, and don't forget to leave me a comment down below because I look forward to reading your comments. And have you actually noticed? I actually respond to every single one of you. I take the time to do that. So leave me a comment, and guys, happy quilting. Let's go check it out. So I have my fat quarter bundles here. Now, just to bear in mind, you can use a layer cake for this one, but I didn't have any more, and I didn't really feel like cutting a selection of fabrics, which I usually do if I want to put my own bundles together. Nevertheless, I have a fat quarter bundle here, and it's called Flutter, and I do like the colors. I think it's absolutely beautiful. So I have 10 in total, and I'm going to use them as 9.5 inch squares. So I'm going to get all of this ironed, and what I will do is then show you how to cut it down. But let me open it up and show you the colors. I just love the colors. It's nothing special. It's just got a background print on it. Let me just show it to you what they all look like. Hopefully you can make them out. So that's the black there. That's the green. I just think the colors are so beautiful and vibrant. That's the blue. Blue's my favorite colors. I'm sure you know by now because I've often tell you this. That's the purple. That's the pink. And that's a very girly pink, isn't it? This is another bright pink. I think it's called cerise. And this is red and the yellow. So the fabric collection is called Flutter. And it's there. Hopefully you can make it out. Okay, and I bought this at my craft store Spotlight, and I'll insert a little thingy for you there because I already did a video on this fabric store. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love it. All right, so what I'm going to do is get all of this ironed because you need to iron your fat quarters before you start to cut. That way you get accurate cuts. And the reason why you do that, for those of you who are beginners, because we have all of these creases here, and we don't want that. Can you see all those folds? We don't want that. We want it lovely and flat, so that once we cut, we know our cuts are accurate. Okay, now a fat quarter usually comes 52 centimeters by 50, which is roughly about 20 to 21 inches. Okay, and so you cannot necessarily get a 10-inch square out of all of it. Now, one side would be 10-ish and the other side would be 9.5. So rather than try and fussy cut and stress myself out and get only 3, I am going to cut this into 9.5 inches square. So I'm going to use the whole fat quarter to get 4. So out of my 10, I will have 40. Okay, so I'm going to get it all ironed, as I said, get started on that. So give me a sec and I will be back. Okay guys, so all of it is ironed now. All I've done so far is to fold this edge to edge salvage before somebody corrects me. Okay, and I'm going to line it up on one of my grid lines here to the bottom so that it's nice and straight. And I can see at the edges here that my edges are a little bit uneven, so I'm just going to straighten one side so that I have a straight line to work with. Now, what I would say to you is just be very careful if you're going to use fat quarters like I am using here. Do not trim off a lot. All you're literally doing is straightening this edge so that you can make sure you have a nice straight cut. Okay, so I'm just going to use this ruler here, and the reason why I'm doing that and the reason why I'm saying to just be mindful is because we haven't got much to work with. Yeah, I don't want you to cut away too much at the end to straighten up. So for example, don't take off 1 inch. Okay, you're just skimming it basically so that you don't waste the fabric, so that you have a nice straight edge, so that you can be sure that you will get your 9 inches. Okay, so as I said, I've folded in half, so once I have start cutting, I will have 4 pieces all together. All right, so I'm going to show you the amount that I have taken off, and that's literally it. Okay, so I'm going to turn this around. Probably I should have done that first of all, but because I'm right-handed, I like to lay the ruler on the edge that I've cut. So I'm lining it up with the 9.5 inch, sorry, my apologies, I keep saying 9.5 inch, so that I know I have enough space here. Now, because the fabric is wider than the 9.5 inch, you will have excess at the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to line it up there. Remember, it's folded again, so I will be getting 2. This is my salvage down here. So I'm going to cut that in half. I'll just move that one up to the side for a minute, and I'm going to do the usual as though I'm squaring up a quilt. So I am just simply going to go all the way around. I'm going to turn because I know this side is lovely cut. Just ignore that sound. That's my iron telling me it is switching itself off. So line that up there as well. So you see I've got extra there. So this is what I'm referring to when I said do not trim off too much before you start cutting. You're just trimming it off the edge so that you have a nice straight area. Okay, move that, and I have my 2 pieces of fabric here. All right, so I'm going to do that one more time. So this one has already been cut. So I'm going to use that nice straight edge. And again, take my squaring up ruler, put a 9.5 inch. And again, just cut all the way around like I did before. Turn this, and again line up. It will take a little bit of a time, but as I said, if you do have a layer cake, by all means, you can use that. You don't have to cut your fat quarters down, but I didn't have any left, and as I said, I fell in love with this fabric. And as I was looking at the fabric, it has lots of little butterflies on it. I was like, oh, Oh, that's why it's called flutter, because butterflies flutter, don't they? So yeah, so that's why I was like, oh, so yeah. All right, guys, so here is my 4, and that's what we're aiming for. So each fat quarter must give us 4, so we have 40 in total. All right, so let's get started. All right, so decided now to bring some of my own fabrics into the whole plan of the quilt. So I'm going to be using the butterfly print. You're going to be needing some white background fabric, which I have here, and I've already completed all of the cutting. So I'm going to lay all of this out, and then we will talk about further of how we're going to sew this together. All right, so this is my first layout of the star. I'm going to change it around and see, make another star with a pattern and see what actually happens. I may possibly change the yellow squares around it, but let's have a look at the next one. All right, so with this one, you get a 4 patch in the middle. And I've put the light blue at the end to the corner. All right, so let's let's try it again. All right, so this is the hunter star. I must admit, I'm liking this one with the green at the corners. Looking very good. Okay, let's try another one and see what we get. All right, so this one looks like a sweet wrapper or a candy wrapper with the white in the middle and the zigzag around it. I like this one. I also like it with the blue around it as well. What do you guys think so far? This is number 3. So I'm going to do one more and see what sort of shape we can get. You know, I don't want to just think that because we cut the half square triangles, all we can make is a star in the middle. Let's try and see what else we can do with it. All right, so we got a beautiful square around with the fabric, and it looks really nice. Loving this one. Not too crash shot at it, according to my husband, is the word he used, but it's all right. It's okay. You know, it looks like the Red Cross at the moment, but yeah, it's all right. All right, so this is the last one, so I'm gonna choose. I'm not sure I'm liking this one too much, but I'm going to choose, and then I'm going to start laying out, and then I will most likely show you the completed look. Okay, wish me luck, guys. Let me know which one you prefer in the description box down below. I'd love to hear your feedback. All right. Okay, guys, so what I have done here is to lay out my batting. Now we're going to compile the quilt as a quilt as you go. So what I'm going to do is just use half of the quilt top. So the way how I do my quilts for Quilt As You Go is that I will divide the quilt top into 2 pieces. Okay, so 2 halves. So basically I will not sew it together as an entire quilt top. So this is half of the quilt top here, and what I'm going to do is just fold it in half. The reason I'm folding it in half is because my batting comes in a roll, and so therefore the end of the batting is here, or I should say the fold of the batting is here. Okay, so because it's on a fold, excuse me, rather than try to roll the whole thing out on my center table here, I use the fold to help me cut it down. Okay, so basically I will then fold my quilt top in half. So remember, this is half of the quilt top, so I'm just going to fold it in half, put the fold against the same fold as the batting, and just dragging it down and just roll it out a little bit more, and then I'm going to just cut it off there. So obviously once I open the whole thing, then it will be at its length. Bearing in mind I do have a lot of space here. Now I don't waste the batting, so the battings and whatever left that's from the trimmings will go to make a scrappy project. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm leaving a little bit on the side on both edges here, so I'm leaving this amount here from the edge so that I have room in case it shifts when I'm quilting. Now you may be wondering, well, why do I do my quilt as you go in this particular format? So a lot of people have said to me, that's not a proper quilt as you go. Well, in my eyes it is. The reason why I do it like this is because it helps you to quilt your quilt quite easily. Yes, there is a joining at the end of it, i.e. you bring the two halves of the quilt together and sew it, and so therefore you do have a seam line. But I think once you have stitched it together, you don't really see that. The whole thing is compiled of seam lines anyway. Okay, so I wouldn't make a big issue of that. So that's the way I do it. I do find that you can quilt your quilt a lot more quickly and easily, and if you're working with a domestic machine where it's got a small throat space, you are able then to quilt it underneath that throat space rather than having a huge quilt to tangle with and to fight with. And I have done that way and I don't like it. Okay, I've also seen the quilt as you go whereby you cut each individual squares and you put it onto the batting and then you find the back of that square and then you stitch the whole thing together. I think that's much more laborious than this technique. So this is the technique I use, i.e. I prepare the quilt top in half, I sew it together in half, and I use one half and then I put the other half together. So that's just the way I do it, and I do find that I can quilt a lot more quickly. So I'm going to cut this now. I'll just roll that back. I'm just leaving probably about 2.5 inch. Now what you can do, and what I tend to do sometimes, is rather than cut this end here, because this end here is where it separates. All right, so let me open that up and show you what I mean. So it opens up here, so you have two pieces. Okay, so rather than cutting this off here and then having two separate pieces, what I will do is then drag this down to the edge and cut under fold. So when I open it up, it's one whole piece rather than having two separate pieces of batching. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So I'm just gonna finish cutting. I've got the wrong scissors here in my hand, but I'm not gonna go walk around just to go walk all over to the other side just to get the correct scissors, but this works. All right, so that's that. So that's done, put on the side. So as I was saying, so then this is what is needed. So what I will do now is simply drag it down to the end here. And then cut it off. Again, giving it about 2.5 inches so that it doesn't move when you're quilting. But to be honest, I've never had it moved because it's basted on there really nicely. So I've never really had that issue too. Okay, so this is just my excess now. And this will make a lovely table runner. Such a good size for it. Right, so that's that. So all there is to do now is to take one side, and notice I've folded right sides together so that when I open it up, I don't now have to go, place it. All I'm doing now is opening one side. I'm going to flop it out, and literally it's done. Just, it's already on there. And all I need to do is to cut the backing fabric to the size of the quilt top. That's all there is to be done now. Look at that. Safely and easily place that on there. You still got your edges there where I've cut it and left it. So what I'm going to do now is to glue base the front side, and then I'll get the backing, put it on and glue base, and then start quilting. So it makes it a lot, so all you've really got to contend with is just these 1, 2, 3, 4 rows to fold on the quilt top, and I'll show you that as well. Alright guys, what you're looking at is half of the quilt that's already been quilted, and I've also quilted the other half. What I wanted to show you here was really how to join the two halves together. So on one of the halves where I intend to join, as you can see, I'm joining where the star is, okay? So what I am doing is cutting off the excess batting, and I'm leaving the backing fabric here. So I've already started on this side. So literally all I'm doing is taking a very sharp ruler, and I'm running the ruler along the edge of where the quilt block stops, and I'm simply just taking my time and cutting it very slowly. Now you need to be very gentle here. This is a process where you need a little bit of patience, because if you rush it, you could possibly cut the backing fabric, and we don't want that to happen. So just take a really sharp fabric shears and just simply, and I'm just using the tip to actually cut it through. And you may encounter some edges, as I'm having problems here with this one, whereby if you have stitch or quilted over into on the batting, you may need to unpick that, but I just use the scissors to get through it. Okay, and you just continue all the way down, trimming off, and I'm going very slowly because I don't want to cut the backing, as I said, and just simply keep it nice and close, and double check each time that you're not cutting. Okay, you can also tilt it forward so you can see what you're doing, but I like to literally budge up the scissors right next to the block and just simply take my time and cut it all the way down. Now once you've done that, I'm going to then show you the next stages, which is very easy and no problems at all. Now for this particular edge here where you're going to join, I will not recommend trying to straighten it up. Ideally it should really be straight already, but I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't recommend you trying to trim it in any way, shape or form. Just leave it as it is, okay, and then we will just simply join it together. So I'm going to continue trimming this off, and then I'll come back and show you the next stages. Alright guys, so let's move on to the next stage. So what I have done, as you can tell, I've trimmed off all of the excess batting here, and this extra fabric is left. The reason I left this fabric here, or the backing fabric, is so that I can actually fold it over to hide the raw edge, but we will come to that later. Now the next stage is to trim off the backing and batting to the edge of the block. So whatever blocks it is, trim it off to the edge of the blocks. As you can see, I've done it on this side to the end there, as well as on this side here. Now remember, we are compiling this in two halves, so this is just half of the quilt top. All right, now what we're going to do now is bring the other half of the quilt top in and put them front sides together. Now what I will do is to link a video whereby if you wanted to add borders onto this stage, I will show you how. But unfortunately for this video, I am not doing borders. I am simply going to join the two halves together, and then once I've done that, then I will add a binding as normal. Hence the reason why I have trimmed it back to the edge of the block, and I've done so with the other half of the quilt top as well. Also, if I wanted to add borders, I will then only trim this area here in preparation to join it together, okay? Because what I would need to do is to leave the backing and batting on the edges of the quilt. Anyway, what I will do is link a video that explains all of this in detail. So if you want to add borders to your quilt as you go, that video will take you through the whole process. Now what I'm going to do now is to add the other one on top, and all I'm going to do is to lay front sides together, Now the important thing here is to line it up as though you were going to sew the quilt top together. All right, so let's say for example we didn't have the backing and the batting on, it would just be the quilt top. We would do this anyway. We would line it up, wouldn't we? Make sure all the blocks are lined up together and pin and sew. The only difference here is that we already have the batting on, and we were able to quilt it quite easily without the stress of having the whole quilt top. This is the reason why I do it this particular way. It's so that if you have a small throat space, you can still make a very decent size quilt, but you're doing it in halves. Depending on the quilt size, you can also do it in threes. It's really down to you. So what I'm going to do now is to line up the blocks as normal. So I'm going to start from this edge here and making sure that all of my squares line up properly. And I'm simply going to take a pin and pin it there so that it doesn't move. All right. So that's that there, and I'm just checking that it's all lined up. Now, provided that everything has been cut accurately, you really shouldn't have a problem. And this one falls nicely. Again, I'm just going to pull it there and line it up. Now, one good thing about this, which is an advantage, is that if for whatever reason you find that you need to slightly tug or pull the quilt tops to join together properly, you can. You wouldn't get any wonkiness happening here. The reason why is because the batting is a little bit stretchy. Now if you were doing that with your ordinary cotton quilt top and the batting wasn't there, you would have a little bit of a stretchy issue, but you don't get that with this particular one, okay? Because the batting gives it a little bit of a give, i.e. a little bit of a stretch. I'm not saying stretch it out of place, but it does give you a little bit of a leeway to do so, which is good. So I'm just moving along and just joining it edge to edge. And because it's a star, I just want to make sure that it really lines up properly. And ideally, this is the same method you would use if you were sewing the quilt top together. You will pin it, make sure it's lined up properly, and then you will stitch it, isn't it? Nothing will be different ideally. It will just be the same thing, the same method you would actually use. So again, just lining those two up there and pinning it, and that one there, and give it a good old pin, making sure that stays. Now what I'm going to do now is to simply go onto the sewing machine, and all I'm going to do is to run a stitch here. Now I am simply going to do a 1/4 inch stitch. However, I could possibly use my utility stitch feet for this. I can use my walking foot, which will be advisable because obviously we have lots of thick fabric here. I will also advise you to lengthen your stitch length so that it glides through there a lot more easily. If you do use a 1/4 inch, again, I would advise you to lengthen the stitch so that it goes through a lot more easily. So all I'm going to do is to just run a 1/4 inch stitch along here. I am going to use my utility feet and then get it over and done with. Then I'm going to come back and show you what to do. So ideally you're going to have a seam line here. So the objective here, two things, is to think about what thread color you want on your quilt. Okay, so what I tend to do is whatever color I'm using on the back is what I'm actually going to use. Now because I'm joining this, I am not going to see that seam line on the other side because it's going to be hidden, isn't it, within the seam. But the thread choice is important because of the back of the fabric, or the back of the quilt in this case. So I'm going to use the same color that I use for my quilting so that there's no difference. All right, but I'll show you that process once I am done. So let me go do that now, and I'll come back and show you what to do. Alright guys, so the next stage is now, this is what I have done. So I've laid the quilt top flat, back side up. And I have also ironed the folds where the two comes together. So I'll just lift that up so you can see that in the camera there. So you can see it's open, you can see the actual patterns there. Okay. Now, if we look at the leftover backing fabric here, it's quite thick. It is probably, I would probably say, at least 2 inches. Let's have a little measurement and see what it comes out as. 2 inches or 1.5 inches. Yeah, it's 2 inches. So it's 2 inches in width. Now, if you wanted to have it that thick, you can. What will that mean is that it will fold over to hide the raw edge quite wide. I'll try and zoom the camera in so you can see, or I'll move the quilt up and show you. Okay, so coming quite wide if I were to fold this over. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to fold it like this. I'm going to do 2 folds and fold it over. And if I roll it up, you would see it comes quite wide. So you can do that, you can leave it. However, I don't usually like that look because I want to keep it as minuscule as much as possible. One of the tricks for this sort of technique with the quilt as you go is to use an all over pattern. We want that when we fold this over, it blends into the actual pattern and that fold is quite small as possible. So I tend to use just 1 inch. So I'm going to cut this at 1 inch width so that when I fold it over, I am literally just covering that seam line. That's what I'm aiming at. All right. So going back to when I said I use an all over pattern, as you can see, this is an all over pattern. It's just one pattern at the back. It is small. You can use a big pattern. The objective here, as I said, is that once I fold it over, it just blends in to the balance of the pattern because we're going to iron it again and get a good steam on that seam so it lays nice and flat. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to trim it. Once I trim it, I'm going to start folding and then I'm going to use my pins to hold that fold down all the way down and then I will iron it. So I will stitch it and then iron it. So I'm not using my rotary cutter, I'm just going to use my scissors. And if you want, you can give yourself little markings as to where 1 inch stops. So I'm just measuring from there and I'm just going to mark there all the way down with a pen or a pencil, it doesn't really matter, and then join those dots together so then I know where my 1 inch is. Okay, so I'm going to do that now off camera only because I'm just concerned about the length of the tutorial, and then I'll come back and show you. Alright guys, so the quilt measures 63 inches squared. So this is what the quilt looks like. So I'm calling this quilt Butterfly Flutters. What do you think of it? I think it looks really good. Love the vibrant colors, absolutely vibrant. And the star that I've chosen I think goes really well. I've actually set the star off to one side and I think that looks really good. I didn't want it in the middle. I mean, because you always do in the middle, don't you? But I just set it off to one side. I just love that. Let's go in a little bit closer and have a look at the quilting. So I did serpentine lines and swirls on this quilt and I think it has come out really nicely actually. It was not a bad effort on the star. As you can see, it's quite different to the others. So it was alright. In terms of the quilt as you go, you can see the line there where I've joined it together. But if you come back from a distance, you would not even notice. But this is the completed finished quilt. I have used a blue binding on the edge and I think that complements pretty nicely. To make this quilt bigger, you can use add a border as well if you wish. But I think it was just fine as it was. I just think it looks really beautiful. Loving the star literally on the side. Just really nice. So if you think you can do this, by all means, as I said, you get 2 projects from your fat quarter, and in a previous video I showed you how to make the table runner or the table topper. Really beautiful, lovely. 2 projects, 1 fat quarter. Isn't that fantastic, guys? Really love the quilt. I think it will make a beautiful wall hanging. That's what I visualize it as. So if you're interested in buying this quilt, do holler at me. Check out my website. It will be up there if you're interested in buying this quilt, by all means. If you want to learn how to make it, by all means watch the video right to the end. It is quite simplistic. It is not difficult at all. But I just love the colors. Let me show you the back. Just an all over print, and I always use an all over print when I am doing my quilt as you go. And as you can see, that's the binding or the joining there, sorry I should say for that. But overall it looks really nice. Love the binding there. Again, no issues at all. This has come together really quickly, guys. And as I said before, you can really manage this under your domestic sewing machine. So that way, if you're doing it as a quilt as you go using my technique, you can get this done really fast. Beautiful, simple quilt, but yet very striking, beautiful, bright colors. So guys, that's all I have for you today. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. Do like and subscribe. And give me a shout out. Let me know what you think of the quilt. And I look forward to hearing from you. Bye guys, have a good one. See you in the next one. Bye for now. And of course, as I usually say, happy quilting, guys.